Welcome to the Next Chapter Experience podcast with Jeanette Lissette. Thought leaders explore the mindset, wellness, and wealth needed to realize next level transformation. Let's get started. Welcome to the Next Chapter Experience. I'm your host, Jeanette Lissette. Today's guest is Dai Manuel. He is an award-winning digital thought leader, an author, distinguished Toastmaster, keynote speaker, former partner and COO of a multi-million-dollar retail company, and a sought-after lifestyle mentor and executive performance coach. Dai knows the struggle of the juggle and keeping his health and happiness a priority. He models his work based on a 5F's platform: fitness, family, faith, and finances, with an overarching roof of fun, built on a rock-solid foundation of health and nuggets of wisdom and inspiration to take action to be your best self. They're all guaranteed with Dai. Dai, welcome to the Next Chapter Experience.
Thank you. And thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure. And sometimes I hear it, I'm like, wow, I forgot I've done a few things.
You have done a few things, which is the reason why I feel really privileged to have this opportunity to talk with you today. Really. Let's just go ahead and dig in. There's so much about your background. So we were to do a comparison between where you are today and let's say where you were, say, 10, 12 years ago.
It's almost 3 years today, almost. Like about a month away, it'll be 13 years. I came to a conclusion that my relationship with alcohol was not good for me. I had a really, pardon using the popular terminology and pardon the pun, but I had a very toxic relationship with alcohol. And for those that know, alcohol is very toxic on us personally and mentally and emotionally. But I learned early on in life, manage my social anxiety. Alcohol was a wonderful thing. It was something, a couple drinks in, and all of a sudden, normally I'd be the wallflower off in the side, just observing and waiting for people to come to talk to me rather than being the one that would be proactive enough to go up, shake hands and introduce myself and meet new people. I'm naturally introverted, but I choose to work as an extrovert. So I've had some people say I'm an ambivert, so I flex between the two. But between you and I, Jeanette, and I do a keynote as an example. I do a 60 to 90 minute talk in front of a large group or sometimes small groups, doesn't matter the size. I still deal with a lot of anxiety before I get up on stage. Like my hands are sweating, my heart rate's racing, and I'm like, oh gosh, what am I talking about? Why am I here? And so the anxiety's still there, but with a lot of practice. And over the last 13 years, really focusing on that work, inner work especially, I've been able to get to a place where I can harness that nervousness in a healthy way to make an impact. And I think that was something that I had to get out of my own way to do. And that's one of the most significant differences in the last 10 years. It's so interesting, right? If I met myself, my 13-year-ago version of me, I'd be like, who the heck are you? And I think they'd be looking at me thinking the same thing because it's just such a change. This is the wonderful example of just how time and this sounding of time works either positively in our favor, right? And I'll have clients and they like their glasses of wine. And I'm not here to vilify alcohol. Please don't take me out of context. But one extra glass of alcohol above and beyond what you need to consume in a day, from a caloric example, that seemingly small 150 calories a day, you compound out 150 extra calories a day for 365 days, that's about a 5 to 8 pound increase in body fat.
Wow.
But it's just one little glass of wine a day. But it's amazing. That's, again, Einstein said, or I guess he's coined it as one of the 8th wonders of the world, was compound interest, right? Mm-hmm. Next to love, he said it's the 2 most powerful forces in the world or universe. And I think he's right. But we can compound things positively. It doesn't have to be a negative. But I think we forget that it is those little habits that we think that aren't a problem, but over time become a problem. And we wake up one morning, we're like, whoa, I got an extra 100 pounds on me. Where did that come from? It's, I guess, those 5 years of eating the way I've been eating and not moving my body. This is the effect. And I can speak to that as well, because at age 9, I went down a path of dealing with a lot of mental health challenges, et cetera. And eventually by 15, I was morbidly obese. Plenty to unpack there too. But I know you asked for 3, but that's the one thing that really pops front of mind, Jeanette, is how much I've changed mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually in the last 3 years. But it didn't happen by accident. It happened because I chose for it to happen.
That's powerful. That's powerful right there. I've heard you share on many platforms that you focused initially on the exterior, on the outside. Yeah. And then you realized that you needed to go deeper. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was slow to that one, okay? Slow to that learning. And what I mean by that was it took me about 32 years of being on this planet before I figured out, oh, maybe if I start focusing internally rather than on everything that's outside of me, maybe I can actually make some systemic changes that will impact how I'm feeling about my life. Because I was always chasing something outside of me. Always. For me, it was affirmations, praise, to be seen as important and of value, and looking for that consistent validation. And that's what I was always chasing. And I was chasing it any way I could get it. I was starving for attention. I could try to unpack this, and believe me, my psychologists that I've worked with, they've all helped me with this. So I got it reframed in a much healthier way now. But when I think back on it, I didn't know any better because of the role models that were in my life and the people that I associated with the most. They were all trying to figure it out too. We were all just trying to make a go at it. I'm staring down the barrel of 46 years old. At the time that we're having this conversation, in 3 days, I turned 46. But with that realization is also that, wow, 46 years of experiences, and not all of them positive. Many of the ones that were negative, I used to find that my brain would get hooked on those and repeat those experiences again and again. So I was always living in this sort of fearful state of regret, and it would often paralyze me taking a step forward in my life. And if I think about that in my 20s, and it was just because I didn't have the resources, nor did I have the faculties or understanding of what to ask, and most importantly, how to ask for help.
I ask you about that. Asking for help, but more so in the aspect of how did you begin to do that introspective work, and who did you reach out to? Did you read books first to get started? Yes. Or tell us a little bit more about that experience.
That's a great point to make, because I look at who we are today as just as a society, as a culture. I'm speaking about North America specifically right now, just because that's the playground you and I play in. I'd imagine a lot of your listeners are also in North America. And when we look at just cultural shifts that we've seen in the last 20 years, a lot of that's been driven by technology and just access to information, but also misinformation. We got some good and some bad. We can duke it out any way we want and debate this all day long, but I'll leave the politics to politicians. And all I can say is that if we choose, we have access to so much positive, reinforcing, uplifting, as well as life-changing content. But do we choose to seek it? Do we choose to consume it? Because what goes into this 6 inches between the ears, it will come out in some fashion. And it usually comes out in our actions, our thoughts, how we speak, how we show up. I recognize that in life. And I recognize the things that were influencing me weren't leading me down a path where I felt happy. I felt joy. I felt fulfilled. And bang your head. And times I'm a movie buff. I can see the comic book posters in the back here. I'm a nerd that way. I love that stuff. I'm very nostalgic of that. But I love the stories, right? The stories of people that are supernatural. They go above and beyond what we believe is possible. And this happens in real life all the time, right? And when we find those stories, it inspires all of us to hopefully, and I say hopefully, because I see this in everybody that I meet, and I believe you have this too as well, based on your experiences and what we talked about before we hit record today, was this ability to see in others the potential that maybe they can't see in themselves. And I'm just very grateful that once I got into my early 30s and I had this life-changing event, and I'll speak to that in a second here, which is really framed around a question that my wife asked me. But at 32, almost 33 years old, I decided that, okay, enough's enough. I need some help. I need to learn a better way of living my life and not have to rely on all these exterior, like alcohol, and even sometimes that led to narcotic use. And I'm not proud. I've also done other things under the influence of those things. I've made choices and said things and done some actions that I'm not proud of. Do I regret them? Of course I do. If I had a chance to redo them, would I do the same thing again? No, not knowing what I know now, especially knowing who I am now. But at first, when I first started down the journey of the inner development, I'll tell you, it was really scary. I'm just being honest, because sometimes we get really good at distracting ourselves from ever taking a look inward. We're sometimes worried about what we're going to find.
That's what I was going to ask you. What was the fear? What was it that you thought you were going to discover?
It was more so what I also thought others would discover about me. And that was the thing that really affected me the most, was this idea that others are going to see me differently than I've wanted them to perceive me as. We have a certain way of just showing up, and we show up a certain way because we want to give off an impression and ultimately develop a perception of who we are, what we're about, and we want people to think about us a certain way. But a lot of the times, it's not necessarily genuine. If I'm fully honest with you today, this last week and a half, I've had some mental health struggles. I have. I've had some really low periods. I got into a fight with my daughter last week, my 19-year-old. And
yeah, you have tears now.
Yeah, and 9-year-old, both girls, so that's karma. But it's the best thing in my life. It was my kids, my wife, my family. I love it. It's one of my main values. And I didn't always honor that, though. But in this last week, we had a fight, and we haven't really resolved that yet. She's been house sitting, so she hasn't been at home. So we've had this space, and it's amazing how we get caught up in these mental patterns of just repeating things over and over. And so I found myself in a bit in that cycle this last week, and I've emerged out of it now, thankfully, and we're starting to reconcile that issue, and that's nice. But I know who I was years ago. I didn't have the faculties or the understanding nor the resources to know how to reconcile. That's what I achieved through doing some of that inner work, that introspective work. And of course, having some professionals be able able to help me understand what it was that I was exploring. And I think that's the problem, was a lot of us try to go this on our own. We might pick up a book, we watch a great TED Talk, we listen to some inspiring podcasts, and we chat to a couple people that we've met that we have a certain perception of, that they understand this, they've got it all figured out. So whatever they tell me has got to be, maybe that's what I need to do. And then we find out maybe this isn't the right way for me. But sometimes we have to go explore it to figure that out. And I've been doing this for 13 years now, since I made that decision. And for anybody that's listening, if you're struggling with something similar, listen, I know it's hard, but I also know there's always an opportunity to change. There's always an opportunity to take a line from your book, is draw that line in the sand and recognize everything that's led me up to this exact moment. It's okay. This line is a representation of that, but I am now stepping over that line. It's a clean beach in front of me. There's no footsteps here. What path am I going to create now? And there's something to that fresh start and what it can do for us. But to make it the best start, clarity breeds confidence. When we feel more confident, we procrastinate less, we take decisive action, we're in a more creative mood, if you will, or mindset, and we're able to just lean in, explore internally, who is it that we really are? Why are we?
Who we want to be.
Exactly. Thank you. Because that gives us shape and direction. And that's what we can fill in. And it is daunting. It is intimidating at times. I'm just being fully transparent here. But I'll tell you, as keen as that work has been, it's always been worth it. Because what I've gained from it, as far as deeper connections, greater understanding, deeper love and friendship. But also, I realized that after being in a career for some years, that was no longer my path.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And that was intimidating because I honestly, I was a partner in the company. I was like, I'm here for life. This is do or die kind of thing. Like I really felt that this is my path, but things change when we change. And sometimes we're afraid to admit that the thing I'm doing right now doesn't fulfill me anymore. I'm feeling drawn to do something else, but making that leap, that change, especially the longer we've deeply entrenched that path, it feels a lot harder to get out.
It does. I have to admit, with all of the time and development and education that it takes to really become an expert at what you do, high value, when you walk away from something like that you thought was really going to be your path, it's more than a notion to do. What I found is I had to reconcile with myself about all this experience in this particular area. What am I supposed to do with that? And now it's just coming to me where I can integrate some of the learnings and experiences that shaped my entire life.
Yes.
And had value at that time, still does. That's the reason why I'm in the position that I'm in right now.
But you have to do the introspective and the reflective work to know that, to garner the lessons and the learnings from those experiences. And because a lot of us, we're so focused, we experience the experience and then we're moving on to the next one. Never really thinking back on what did we just do? What did I learn? How can I make it better next time? Like that extra bit of reflection and analysis, if you will, of why we're choosing to do the things that we're doing, to find out what is that motivation? Is it a subconscious motivation? Did I do that without even being aware that I did it? Like until we do some of that work, you don't know. You don't really truly become aware of our patterns. And more importantly, what we often hear in the psychology circles is this idea of self-limiting beliefs. These beliefs that we have about ourselves that subconsciously we believe to be absolute truth. And it affects how we show up in the conscious living of our life. And it limits us. It literally, truly limits us. And some of mine were like, I was afraid of leaving what I was in. I was afraid of trying to go off into doing my own business. I was intimidated by that thought. I was like, geez, will I be able to make a living? Can I do this? Feels like that's what I want to do. But really? I'm going to leave a very stable career path, like very lucrative. It was supplying my lifestyle for me, my family. We had a great life. Why rock the boat? But wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. Sometimes you just got to say, you know what? Forget it. I'm jumping in anyways.
Yes.
But it is a leap of faith at times, but we have to have that faith in ourselves. There's a game that my wife and I play. And we did this when I was exiting out of my career of 17 years. And we learned about this game, if you will. And I don't know if it's a game, but we treated it like a game. Because when you gamify things, it becomes more enjoyable, more fun. It gets some happy endorphins flowing. So it makes the work, without dumbing it down, let's just say easier. Okay. It just feels like less resistance when you're doing that kind of analysis or reflection and really getting to the nitty gritty of, do I really want to make this kind of a change? And one of the questions that we picked up from Tim Ferriss, he did a TED Talk many years ago. And he has this, it was his talk where he talks about stoicism. And in particular, he talks about this exercise of fear setting. And with this, so take this idea. It's like you were thinking about making a big change. Let's not ignore the fear. All right. The fear is always there. Listen, it's in our DNA. We don't have to look at the bushes now and think, oh my gosh, is there a tiger behind that bush? And we don't really have that kind of a fear anymore, but that's still in our DNA. We've lived most of the millennia with those kind of fears around us. So we are sensitive to this. It's what keeps us alive, right? But our fears today are far less rational. Okay. And we have to acknowledge that, right? And our part in that and how we continue to feed that. But here's this thing. If I go back to this idea of exiting out after 17 years, I guess what stemmed that, I should first refrain back to 13 years ago when I made the big change that set this in motion, this exiting of my career of a very long time to try something completely different. For those that have a poor relationship with substances, whether it be alcohol, gambling, even like as far as the habits or pornography or shopping, like anything where we would classify it more as a compulsion or an addiction, or we just constantly value that thing over maybe our own life. Like that's what it was for me. It was really a value proposition. I valued alcohol and how it made me feel and how I believed it made people perceive me. I valued that over everything else in my life. And you can only do that for so long. I'm not here to burst anybody's bubbles. I think we can all accept this as a truth. You can only live that for so long, and eventually something's got to give. I'm a slow learner. Things gave a number of times, but eventually the big one gave, and that was my wife. Our kids were both under the age of 6. They were 4 and 6 at the time. And my wife was at her wit's end. Yeah. And she is so kind, so understanding, so supportive, but she's also a fierce redhead. Okay. And she sees something in me, always has this potential, and has always really tried to feed into that and unlock it, unleash it, get more out of me. And at times against my will, so to speak. And what I mean by that is she challenges me. And sometimes I don't want to be challenged, but I know it's for the best. And I know she's teaching me to unlock that potential, to be the person that she knows I've said I want to be, that I'm not aligned with based on my actions. And we were having a discussion, and I won't go into all the gory details. If you want to hear it, listen to my TED Talk. But the synopsis, just to get to the point, we were talking about what life was going to look like to co-parent our kids, what was going to be like to have separate households. All I could think back was also when I was 9 and my parents sitting me and my brother down to explain that they were going to be separating and divorcing. So at age 9, my life changed. Everything changed for me. And this is going way back, right? Where there was a lot of stigmas around divorce back then. There was only one other kid in my class that had parents that weren't still together. Now, out of a class of 30 kids. So I felt really like my whole world was crumbling, right? And there wasn't any support. Like there wasn't, okay? I couldn't Google it. But my wife asked me a question. And this is the question. So everybody that's listening or watching, this is the one you want to take to memory and keep in your back pocket anytime that you need to cut through all the noise and get to the point. She looks me in the eyes and she says, Dai, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters? Literally, that question was like a lightning bolt hit me, because for some reason that morning at nearly 33 years old, all I could see was this image of people, more importantly, men, showing up like I was showing up in my life at that moment, but coming to want to get closer to my daughters, my wife. Like I could envision them coming to my household, knocking on the door and being like, yeah, we're here to see your daughters. I'd be like, you're not allowed in here, man. There's no way. But that's what I was role modeling. I was saying that to my kids, to my wife, to my friends, to my communities. This is what a man is. This is what a business owner is. This is what a husband, a brother, a son. That's what I was reflecting. Again, pardon the pun, but it was a very sobering question for me, because in that moment, I decided to make a commitment. And my commitment was that I was going to go 1 year without drinking. I know some people are probably like, only a year? That's not that long. I'm like, well, put this into context. From the age 16 to almost 33, almost 16 years. The longest I'd ever done is like a sober January, like once. 1 month without alcohol. So for me, this was a big commitment. And I was happy and excited and afraid all at the same time to make it. I made it for myself first, and then I told my family. I onboarded them. I pleaded. I asked for another opportunity from my wife. Give me one more chance. I'm going to make this right. I am wanting to be that man. I'm not going to stop until I am, truthfully, 100%. And she always saw that potential in me. So for some reason, she saw in me like, okay, there's something different, because she'd heard me making that kind of a promise before. And I had always undermined it by doing something stupid and believing that, oh, I've been good for the last few weeks. I earned a night out. Come on. What do you mean? Come on. And that's what got everything started. I literally that day, like just stopped, got rid of all the alcohol in our home, and just stopped drinking. And within the first 6 weeks, I was like, holy smokes, this is hard.
I was going to ask you about that. What kind of changes you had to make to your environment in order for it to support you in this?
The biggest change and the most impactful change, and it's not always the most popular one, because for some people, when you invite people to change communities, that can be really hard. Friend groups, especially.
So as we talk about environments and changes that you had to make to support some of the changes that were happening internally, can you talk a little bit more about that and other things that would have supported you?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I had to recognize, I had to come to the conclusion for myself, because I was trying to do as much as I could on my own. All right? I had let some of my closest connections and friends and colleagues know that I was making this commitment, that I was stopping drinking, but I didn't really make it public, nor did I believe at the time initially that I needed any help. But a few weeks in, almost a month in, I hit a wall. I was really struggling. And I remember the night in particular, my wife and I were sitting on the couch. It was late at night, the kids were in bed. And I don't know why, but for the first time in our relationship together, and we'd been together for about 10 years at this point, for once, I opened up about everything. Like quite literally, like everything. I just dumped it all out. Everything that I was feeling, my inadequacies that I felt, how sheepish I felt around even business and feeling like I was a fake, a fraud. And some people refer to that as the imposter syndrome. That's what I was living. So that's why I put on such a show all the time. And I had this sort of facade I would put up because I was trying to project that I am this person. Meanwhile, on the inside, I didn't feel like that. So that you get this sort of very opposing views, right? So there's this little war, tug of war happening, and I admitted I needed help. And we had changed the environment. So we made sure that initially, at least the first few months, I didn't go to any places that served alcohol. I really didn't want to be around it. I didn't want to have to even deal with the choice. To be honest, I didn't want to have to say yes or no. I just didn't want to be provided with the choice. I was like, it's easier for me not to be around it right now. And that social anxiety was still there. And it was loud and clear that this is here, man. I'm going to have to learn to live with this. And I was like, I don't want to live with it. I want to learn how to deal with it in a healthy way so I can manage this, but also succeed and move through it to truly be that person I've always wanted to be and thought I was. And I realized I needed some help. So I found a psychologist, I found a relationships counselor, and that went great. And I worked with them maybe 3 or 4 months. That was it. It wasn't like a prolonged thing. It wasn't like it was a thing and a for life thing. It was like I needed some help to clear some things, and we did that. And when change happens, it happens, right? When we make up our mind to do something differently, like we just got to start taking action and do the different things. And if you do it enough and frequent enough, that new thing is going to become the thing. And then it eventually gets to a place you just don't think about it anymore. It's who you are. This one was a lot bigger because it was not an external change. Because that was one thing I did really well as a teen was I just focused on the exterior. One of the motivations was I just wanted a girlfriend. So I was like, if I could change how I look, maybe a girl will want me. Obviously, I've unpacked all that. I just wanted someone to love me, to want me, to see value in me. And that was perpetuated into my 20s and my early 30s. And all that started to get unpacked by using cognitive behavioral therapy as well as logotherapy, really becoming conscious of what are my behaviors, what are my habits, my patterns, what are some of the triggers. If you think about when do we do a habit, right? It's, oh, I feel hungry in my stomach. There's some hunger pains. Oh, that's a trigger. I should probably eat something. We eat something. Oh, and now there's results. I feel full. Okay, good. So you can see how that loop works. It works like that in lots of different ways in our lives. And when you start looking at the things that we do consistently and regularly and frequently, there's usually a trigger that puts in motion things, that action, right? And then we get a result or a feeling after doing it. When you become hyper aware of some of the aspects of that in your life, you can start to put a plan in place to basically reprogram yourself. Now, the neat thing about logotherapy is though, and for anybody that really wants to dive into sort of the origin story of logotherapy, Dr. Viktor Frankl, his initial work is what basically founded this whole idea of logotherapy, which is all about aligning purpose and meaning in our lives. Because once we get really clear on that and we build an identity around that, it's amazing how much more passion and excitement and energy we have to move forward in our life. And I needed to get some clarity on that. I think we live in a culture that, quite frankly, perpetuates this constant idea that if I want something, I want to change, it should be able to happen quickly. If you think about the habits that have led us down certain paths, it wasn't like we did something once. It's not like I went to the gym one time and then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I'm fit and healthy now. It's, you know what? I skipped McDonald's one night. Now I'm healthy. Whoa, I had a salad tonight. I wish it was that easy. That'd be great, but it's not. It takes consistent effort and work and commitment. And full disclosure, I did try 12-step programs and I went for a few meetings and I read the literature. I got some books, but I really couldn't reconcile personally this idea that I had to own a label, like this is going to be a part of my identity forever, that I'm an alcoholic, that I am powerless.
Let me think of how they explained it, this person. There's no such thing as a recovering alcoholic. You were just an alcoholic. This
That's
is
correct.
How it was explained to me.
You're right. And in recovery, and I'm always in recovery. And it's, are you ever not? Well, no. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And I was like, no, I was fully aware of every decision to drink. I was aware when I would turn my phone off so I could tell my wife when I get home early in the morning, you know what, sorry, my phone died. I didn't know. I lost track of time. I was aware of what I was doing. There was nobody holding a gun, nor did the bottle there sitting on the table that the server brings around holding a gun to me saying, hey, drink this. I chose to do it. I was the one buying the rounds. Get real with your role in your own life. It's just be completely accountable to your own choices and actions. It's the one thing I have to encourage people. If you want want to move into a path of change, you have to fully own where you're at and what brought you there.
I believe that 100%. In fact, I was on one of these weekend seminars recently, and there were several participants. There was one woman who was not really ranting and raving, but she was validating the reason why she felt the way she did based on some things that had happened in her past. At some point in your life, you have to take personal responsibility.
Yes.
And you have to own it.
You have to. Like it's, and I hate using the word have to. I like to say you get to, but as my wife's always very quick to correct on the side. She's just, that's her nature. Like we don't even use the 4-letter C word in our house. Can't. No, we don't say that because we choose not to, but it's not about, we can't do anything. We choose not to do some things. And so these little subtleties, that's what I live with. And I'm grateful for it. It's interesting though, but I'm not here to vilify or to say it's not a program that works. It does. But is it for everybody? I don't necessarily believe that. I think it's a very personal journey, and change, whatever way it happens, it's usually a good way, as long as we're very aware of what we're choosing to do.
That's a very generous and astute way of looking at it, and very compassionate way of looking at it as well. So if it wasn't this 12-step program, Dai, then what was it?
Yeah, for me, it was CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy and logotherapy, but it was also reclaiming my health. That was a huge one. I re-engaged with my passion for fitness. And for me at that time, I really got active in CrossFit to the point that within a few years, I was competing at a national level here in Canada, and I loved it. Eventually, I sustained an injury at the Western Canadian Finals, and I was like, okay, you know what? I've been pushing the envelope because my age is going up too. I need to modify how I train, and pushing those intensities, you just can't help it. All athletes know this. You push the intensity to win, that margin of error shrinks, and the opportunity for injury exists. So I was rolling the dice. I knew it was going to happen. And it happened. I'm okay with that because that taught me another valuable life lesson, but that's another day. But health and fitness for me, in particular, recognizing the nutrition influence that my foods were having on me emotionally and energetically, because people need to start feeling better. Like just feeling better. Do you wake up in the morning with energy, hop, skip, and a jump? Or do you muting your phone alarm or the alarm 3, 4, 10 times? I'm telling you right now, there's an opportunity to improve. Okay. And so if you double down your efforts on just getting back to a place where your energy is flowing in a healthier way and in a more engaging way, so you're excited, present, you're ready to go, and you have the energy to sustain that, you know what? You can handle any changes that come your way. No matter how big that mountain of change looks, you can climb it. There's one important metric that I'd like to just share with people. If you have an activity tracker, I wear an Apple Watch. Yeah. And most of these newer activity trackers monitor something called heart rate variability. The acronym's HRV. And if you're not familiar with that, I've written, I don't know, half dozen articles on my website, just daimanuel.com. If you type in HRV in the search function, you'll find it. But if you learn to monitor just even that one metric, it gives you a great idea on not only your, but also your mental preparedness, just to handle life, activity, and all the things that are involved from waking to sleeping. So everything that happens in between those two bookends, HRV is a window into whether or not you're ready. That's just one little way to monitor and see the trends. So when you start making these changes, there's going to be days where you're like, oh man, I don't feel like I'm changing. I don't feel like there's any progress. I actually feel like I'm going backwards, and it's okay. You might feel like that, but just monitor the data.
Yeah.
Monitor the trends. Yeah, you might be dipping today. Where you dropped today, you started way down here. So your new line, right, is actually higher than where you were before. So just give yourself some grace, some understanding, some love.
The awareness of that is important, which is what I was telling my nephew. If I woke up every morning thinking, oh my God, I feel terrible, I don't know how I would make it through the day, but that's not how I wake up. I wake up, good morning, Thursday.
Love that.
Just really grateful. You know what I mean? And even if I'm moving a little slower, Dai, I think to myself, okay, so I'm moving a little slower. I wonder what the reason for that is. So let's really look at this. Did you drink enough water yesterday? I'm looking for reasons as to why I feel that way, and then what I need to do in the new day to make sure that I get on track, the track that I want to be on. So the hyper awareness piece,
yes,
it's critical. However, this is another thing that we need to talk about before we close up our meeting, is how to balance all the kinds of things that you want to accomplish, as you see, the juggling, all of these things that you know you want to accomplish and still live life worth living.
I'll give you the easy answer. And this is as simple as I can make this. Forget time management. Forget about it. You can't grab hold of time. I've tried, okay? You can't buy it off a shelf. You can't put it in your back pocket for later. I'm sorry. You cannot grab it. It's intangible. But what's not intangible is your commitment of how you're going to use your time. So get really good at commitment management. So think about your week. And this is an exercise I do every Sunday with my wife and my kids. We look at our week ahead and we time block everything, like personal time, exercise, health time. Even if we have special events, the kids have special tests, like we just get everything blocked out. So we know what we're committed to or committing to. And the neat thing is I also color code on my calendar. They don't necessarily do it in my family, but I love doing it because I'm a very visual person. So I'll use pink for any of my family commitments. I will use light green for any conversations that I'm going to have, like a podcast. I will use dark green for client calls. I like to use red for my fitness commitments. Now, the neat thing is once I've blocked out my week, I can look at that and see, holy smokes, I've got very little red blocked in this week. So that means I don't have very much health and fitness committed to this week. I should balance that out. I got to add one or two more in. So I'm going to work out a little workout in here. I'm going to go for a nice afternoon walk here. Great. Now it's blocked in. That's looking a little bit more balanced. So rather than dealing with this intangible battle that we have with our time and how we're leveraging our time, is get really clear on how you're committing to use the time. And I find that's a simple way to get really clear on being able to look at your week in a way that gives you a very clear understanding of where there might be imbalances or where you may not be focusing enough energy. And that's the easiest way I could describe it.
It's good stuff.
Because it makes your awareness. You're taking inventory. You're taking control of your time. It's the easiest way to take something that's subjective and make it very objective. I think that is the piece that helps the awareness, because you can't argue it now. You can't say, oh, I forgot. I lost track of time. Like, how many times do we hear that? Oh, I missed it. I'm so sorry. No, I even use a little reminders. It syncs with my phone. My phone pops up. It gives me like 3 reminders before an appointment. It's 1 hour, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, I've set it up. Like, we can leverage technology to support us in these commitments that we're making. But whatever system we use, just make it something that you can use consistently.
Those who may be struggling with the juggling of family, career responsibilities and things of that nature, the intentionality behind planning it is really where it begins. And say, for instance, you don't go for that walk and you look at your calendar and yeah, I didn't go for that walk. You have a plan of action.
What I like to invite people, just to piggyback what you just said, because I think it's so poignant, is this idea if you start seeing a lot of these missed commitments and you find yourself saying tomorrow, realize pretty soon you're just going to have a pocket full of yesterdays and a lot of probably some negative emotions attached to this feeling of I'm either lying to myself or I'm failing. It's a real sure way to make yourself very discouraged and ultimately maybe not even start or quit before you've really gotten going. So my biggest thing I encourage people is just give yourself a lot of grace, a lot of understanding. Don't be hard on yourself. And if you miss it today, that's okay. But make a promise to yourself that you won't miss it again and then follow through. And that's all you can do is just follow through. There's nobody else that's going to judge you for it. Nobody. Because really nobody cares. And I don't mean to be negative or cynical, but at the end of the day, it's on you. If I could find a career where people say, Dai, we're going to pay you to just do self-care every day, I'd be like, okay, sign me up. I'm in. But I haven't found a position that's willing to pay me to look after myself. So I have to take that on myself. And everybody else does. And so have fun with it. Gosh, we got one go at this. Maybe we got more. I don't know yet. But you know later. But I'm just being that we got one go. Make the most of it. Have some fun. Make some great connections.
Fun part. And I noticed that's injected through a lot of your conversations, having fun.
Yes.
And building that rock solid foundation. So you have to find your joy somewhere.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
Then develop some type of consistency with piece of joy that you have. And some people it's running and some people it's other types of sports, maybe CrossFit. It is. For me, it's Zumba.
Love that. Love that.
But the thing that has made the biggest difference in my life is really finding something that I love to do and can do consistently. If I committed to running 10 miles, I'd sustain it for like less than a half a minute. To me, in good health, it's really more about longevity.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
And things of that nature on the long term, for long term, not for a short period of time. So having fun doing what you like to do as it relates to fitness, moving your body, let's say, those kinds of things are important to me. It sounds like the same with you.
Absolutely. It's all many years ago, I made a pivot, especially when I my 40th year on this planet. I realized I had to change how I was doing things. And for me, my focus became on vitality, but more importantly, how that fed into my longevity. And I want to live to 130, 140 or beyond. Sure, why not? But I don't want those last years to be spent not having fun, not enjoying my self, not having a quality lifestyle in life. And that's all on us. Again, who knows? And I'm not here to be a doomsayer or whatnot, but we have to take full accountability for our own health. And once we do, it's amazing. Once you get into that flow and it becomes part of your lifestyle, you don't have to think about it anymore. You just wake up and you do certain things, but you do certain things because they make you feel good. And it actually makes you show up differently with everybody else too.
It does. And that's what I think that's the piece that is missing, or there's a understanding about that piece, or maybe it's just a lack of knowing how you can feel when it becomes something that is just an integral part of your life. It's part of your lifestyle. to light body, to drink the water, to eat food that serves you well, when it's your lifestyle, then it's second nature.
That's right. Correct.
That's what happens. One last question I have for you.
Sure.
You talk a lot about being vulnerable. You have something that is a special thing that happens on Monday evenings.
Oh, that's right.
So I want to ask you, not to say that I would need to be in that meeting, because I know men are invited to that, but what kinds of things you guys talk about?
We've got a Vegas mentality. So it's what happens at the meeting stays at the meetings. But I share my own personal experiences. And that's what we always encourage is you can always talk about your own personal experience, but don't share other people's. I can tell you some of the themes that are recurring. And it's what we all deal with. It's not just men, it's everybody. But there are certain stigmas and stereotypes associated with men that were definitely challenging under the guise or the premise of what does it mean to be a great man? That question, what does that mean to me, to you, to us as a community, to us as a culture, to us as a global part of this equation of humanity, as a gender? What does it mean? And there isn't a right or wrong answer to it, I believe, but it is boiled down to values. And so a lot of conversations stem around emotions and mental health, parenting, careers, but most importantly, just we're all seeking better connection. And here's the most interesting thing. This is one thing that I observed very early on when we started up the groups was it always takes one man to be vulnerable first, to open up the floor, or more importantly, the discussion for others to also be vulnerable. It always takes one person to go first. And that person that goes first, man, it's always exciting because you know that they're at a much different place now where they are experiencing this confidence to be able to express themselves a little bit more openly, but there's also trust in that space that we're holding that they can share something that maybe they've never shared before with anybody. And when we make that available and we share that openly, and all of a sudden we see a handful of other guys put up their hands to signal, I get you, me too. Holy smokes. All of a sudden you realize this challenge or this problem, this thing that I've been keeping inside, feeling guilty or shameful or resenting of my life, no one will understand me. I don't tell anybody this because they're going to judge me. They'll hold it against me. No one gets it. No one will understand my problems. And then you open up about it. And all of a sudden you've got a bunch of other people saying, gosh, I have had the same struggle. Or you know what? I had that same struggle about 5 years ago. Here's what I experienced. And this is what I did. And this was helpful.
Very cool.
But it's amazing because we realize we're not alone in our suffering. And I think that's the misnomer. We all believe that our problems, no one will get us. I used to believe that. Okay. That's exactly what I believe. So I wouldn't tell anybody. And then when I started opening up, I was like, oh man, we're all dealing with the exact same stuff. What have we been doing all these years? Just trying to bump our heads up against the wall and do this on our own when we could all be helping each other. And that's the premise. That is why Mentorship Mondays is what it is. And it's free for anybody to attend. We run 3 on Zoom, Eastern time zone, PST. We also have a UK time. So we have a UK group as well. Those are facilitated Mondays at 7 o'clock. Well, you pick your time zone you want to come to, and away we go. And if anyone wants to join, please send me a message, a DM or whatnot through Instagram. I'll be sure to send you the links. If you can't find it, it's in the profile links as well. Make it easy for people to show up. But thanks for asking that question, by the way.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, the nice thing about women, because we're just following their lead. We're just trying to catch up to something that they've always been doing. But you've got lots of choices. You've got plenty of groups to choose from. Where I find with men, it's becoming more popular, though. There's a lot more men's groups showing up now, way more than ever before. And that makes me feel really happy and very optimistic about the future. Because I also look at all the major problems in the world, and there seems to be always a man at the head of that, good or bad or ugly, whatever. I'm just saying, I'm just going to leave it at that. I think these meetings and these groups and these communities are needed, or else men just have to leave the table and let women take over. That's what I actually think. I'd rather give my daughters the keys to the kingdom because I think they will do a much better job than everybody else. Even if they don't know what to do, they'll still do a better job because their hearts are in it. You know what I mean? And they're not motivated by money, power, or whatnot.
Another conversation.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring politics in there. I hate talking politics. My apologies.
It's all good. You can't get away from it. It just is what it is. It really is, especially here. But again, I enjoyed this time with you, Dai. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last half an hour, 45 minutes. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I will make sure that all of your connect with information is in the show notes. Is there anything that you want to share before we close out our talk?
You know what? Just that this has been wonderful, but more importantly, just acknowledge you, Jeanette. Like you creating the space for these types of conversations to happen and for all of us on the outside to be little flies on the wall, to be participants, observant, as well as hearing, not just listening, but hearing these messages. I just want to say thank you. What you're putting out in the world is much needed. And there's this scale, right? When we look at media, and unfortunately the negativity has been far outweighing the positive. So we need more people like you to change the scale. And I just want to say thank you because you're leading by a great example.
I appreciate that. And so are you. I appreciate your time and everything that you're doing right now, because that energy, as I said, when we first opened up, is just coming right through this screen.
Thank you. It's easy to reciprocate what I'm getting because I just give it back. Thank you.